Hi, welcome back. It's Motzei Shabbos, Parshas Bereshis, and I'm teaching a few courses, college courses this semester, one in finance, one in organizational behavior, OB. And there's a concept called agency theory. So I was rethinking Ma'aseh Breshit, the creation of the universe, from the perspective of agency theory and sort of a quandary that even a Kadosh Baruch Hu finds himself in, Kaviyachol. And so I want to share my thoughts with you. I think we can all learn something important in our own Avodas Hashem. So let me get started. I'm starting with a quote from someone called a transactional leader. Okay, there's two types of leaders. There are transformational leaders and transactional leaders. And so one of the examples given of a transactional leader, a give and take, and it's a fair deal, is Belichick. He was the coach of the NFL team, the New England Patriots, and they won some Super Bowls and were a very, very winning team. And the slogan on the Patriots was, "Do your job." Okay, get the job done. Do your job, or you'll be benched, you'll be fired, you'll be traded. We'll get rid of you. We'll bring someone who will do your job. So it's about obedience and fulfillment of responsibility. Do your job. And I'm adding the continuation of the text for this shiur. Do your job because you're the boss. Okay, and that's the knetch here. That's the chiddush in our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that each one of us is a chelek melokam imal. We carry part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with us. So let's take a look. We're looking at Bereshis, Genesis, the creation of the world, from the perspective of agency theory. So let me remind you about what agency theory is. Here's a definition. When a principal, okay, the party who maybe owns the company, they hire an agent to perform a task. For example, shareholders hire managers, right? The board of directors, they are representative of the owners of the company and they hire a team of managers. Or anytime an employer hires employees. I have a case of a billionaire philanthropist who hired a young man to run her program. And she was having a hard time getting him to do all the programs that she wanted to do. And she threatened him and said, if you don't implement this program in the next month, I'm going to fire you. But he knew she wasn't really going to fire him because he had a lot of power, because he was the head of her organization. So even though she was a powerful billionaire philanthropist, but her power was limited by agency theory, okay? She has to find a way to motivate and align his interests to hers in order to overcome what we're going to see as the agency gap. So let me continue in the definition. Both sides are acting in their own self-interests, but their interests may differ. This creates a principal-agent problem, often described as an agency gap. So you have the principal, the person standing behind, the owner, the boss, the creator in this case, and then you have the players. You have whether they're managers or they're employees, and employees want to work and get paid, but it's in a certain way in their interest to work as little as possible and get paid as much as possible, whereas the owners of the company want to pay as little as possible and get as much work out of their workers as they can. So this is a classic management problem of how to overcome the agency gap, okay? And you want to basically align interests. So for example, the board of directors will make the compensation package of management comprised largely of stock options, ownership in the company, so that they can't just take out a real lot of cash. They have to make the company great and have the company grow in its earnings and its performance in order to take home a lot of wealth for themselves. So that's a way to align the interests of the agent with the principal, and that's good management. So that's what we're talking about here. But we're looking at it from the perspective Kaviyachol of HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating the world. And I'm going to show you now on each of the 6 days of creation. We're not going to talk about Shabbos today, but the first 6 days of creation, he ran into this problem. Okay, so let me go through it day by day. The first day of creation, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim es haaretz, he created the heaven and the earth. And the day is summarized Yom Echad. It's called not the first day, but day one. And it's called day one because of achdut. It's a day of ultimate unity. There's nobody else around yet. Rashi mentions that the angels aren't created until Monday, the next day. So on the first day, there's only God. Now, he does create the heavens and the earth and light and darkness. And the pasuk says, "Vayikra Elokim lo'or yom lechoshech karalayla." And Chazal note that in that pasuk, it says that God called the light day and called the darkness night. It doesn't mention the Shem Hashem on the calling of the darkness night because Eino Kadosh Baruch Hu miyachad shmo al hara. God does not put his name directly on evil or his own absence. Okay, so there is already a distinction even within the first day of creation, which is described as unity. There's still variation within the system, but essentially it's Yom Echad. But here we go. The second day of creation, God is making a firmament and a distinction between the upper waters and the lower waters. And he already runs into some resistance here as the lower waters say, why do they get to be the upper waters and we have to be far away down on earth, the lower waters? And God strikes a deal with them, Kavayachol, and he makes a brit. He makes a covenant with the lower waters and says to them, you will be brought back onto the Mizbeach. You'll be brought on the altar on Chag HaSukkos, Nisuch HaMayim, and the salt, which is extracted from the lower salt waters, will be used always on the Mizbeach. Every korban, every sacrifice will be salted. So God is striking a deal to restore the lower waters to a stature not less than the upper waters. But he's dealing with kina v'tacharus, with jealousy and competition within the creations that he himself has created. The third day, it's famous that, and Rashi brings the story, that Hashem said, let the earth bring forth eitz pri oise pri, fruit-bearing trees which are themselves fruity. Okay, shetam eitzo v'pir yoshavin, that the tree itself will taste like fruit. You could eat the trees. Okay, it's like the Candyman. You could even eat the dishes. So it didn't happen like that. The trees were not fruity. They were woody. Okay, nobody wants to eat fruit trees. They're not tasty. They're woody, but fruits are sweet. So why did the earth or why did the trees do that? Well, they had a self-interest not to make themselves edible. If the trees would be edible, people would eat the trees, and then there'd be no trees. If the trees are woody and inedible, then people will eat their fruits, but they won't eat the trees. So here you had a divergence of interest between the trees, a perceived divergence. The trees thought it would be better for them to be woody than to be fruity. So Kaviyachol, there was disobedience, and we're sidestepping the question of did they have free choice and so forth. We're not going into that. But this is what happened. That and it could be that the Eitz Hadas Toivara, the one great tree, the tree of life in the Garden of Eden, did have Tam Eitzu B'Pir Yoshavin. We know the Esrog, Chazal say, or the Pilpulin. There are some trees that have at least some taste in the tree itself. But the point here again is this divergence, is this agency gap between what Hashem ordered to be done and what came out Lamaisa in practice in the creation. On the fourth day, maybe the most famous, I have a picture here of the earth, of the sun and the moon, where God created Shnei Ma'oris HaGadolim, okay, two great luminaries. And then the pasuk says there was a Ma'ora Gadol and Ma'ora Katan, a great light and a lesser light. And so what happened? So the moon had a claim. Two kings can't share one crown. And so Hashem said, you're right. Lech me'atiyat atzmech. Go diminish yourself. And she said, that's not fair because I said something smart. I have to go diminish myself. So Hashem appeased the moon and gave her the stars and said the moon could appear even during the day sometimes. And ultimately, right, at Kiddush Levana, we talk about in the future, the moon will again be restored to its original stature on an equivalent level with the sun. And that has to do with the give and take and husband and wife and king and queen, the unity between the one who's receiving the light. The sun is giving light and the moon is reflecting light as it is today. But at the beginning, it was possible for the moon to receive and reflect 100% of the light of the sun. That's how God set up the system with Shnei Ma'oris HaGadolim. The moon, because she was selfish and wanted to take some of it for herself and get credit for it, so then she was forced to diminish herself which is the status quo in creation. And we're seeing that really all of these gaps between what Hashem set out in the psukim and what came out, in fact, they're really all expressive of the same fundamental, we're going to call it the agency gap, okay? Where the perceived self-interest of the party is to take a more selfish role as opposed to thinking about the greater good of the whole ecosystem. I'm now holding on day 5. I have a little bit of a scary picture of on day 5, Vayivra Elokim es hataninim hagdolim. Okay, so here God created the sea monsters. Okay, and I have a picture of a monster, of the Frankenstein monster. And I put Frankenstein here because the story of Frankenstein is, there's Dr. Frankenstein who creates a monster who rises up against him. And that's sort of what we're talking about here, where Hashem is empowering and creating and giving life. The word Bereshit bara, the word bara, to create, is also the Aramaic word of bra, of chutz, outward. Hashem is leaving a world that's kulo or, it's all godliness, it's kulo kodesh, to a world that there's external things to God himself. So he's creating something outside of himself, kavayachol. Again, we're always with the basic understanding that ein od milvado kipshuto mamish. There's nothing but God. And yet here God has created us and everything that exists. And that's external to himself on a certain level. And so everything that exists perceives itself from its own subjective perspective and sees itself as being distinct from God, which we are distinct. And so that leads to all these agency gaps, okay, where there's his will and there's my will. And so these sea monsters, these Leviathan, Rashi says, the huge creatures, the Leviathan and its consort, male and female, which he created. But Hashem, in a sense, was forced to kill the female and preserve it in salt for the benefit of the righteous in the world to come. Had the male and the female been permitted to be fruitful and to multiply, the world could not continue to exist because the Leviathanim would overwhelm the world, I guess, with their size and whatever they needed to eat. The world just couldn't exist with if they would procreate the Leviathanim. So here Hashem created something and then had to kill one and castrate the other. Okay, again, these are beautiful, deep midrashim that Chazal are using to teach us essentially one idea that I'm focusing on. And the 6th day, of course, after the creation of the birds and the fish on Thursday, on Friday, is the creation of all the beasts and ultimately man. Adam and Chava are created on Friday, Erev Shabbos, and they could have reached, they were in the Garden of Eden, there could have been immortality and things could have gone really smoothly, but it didn't work out that way. And Hashem really didn't plan for it to work out that way. The Midrashim tell us he set it up in a way that Adam and Eve perceived themselves as independent from God. And so they pursued their self-interest. And although Adam was commanded not to partake of the forbidden fruit, but he decided to partake of the forbidden fruit, it'll be better for me and the whole system if I have a Yetzer Hara, and I will overcome it, and that's how I'll serve God and be Mekadosh Shem Shammai in the best way. Now, that wasn't his job. He should have just do your job. Don't eat the forbidden fruit. But they knew better, okay? The agent did not fulfill the will of the principal. They followed what their perceived interest, and that led to mortality, their deaths ultimately, and our deaths, the fact that we are mortal, and our whole situation, the whole world, which today we live in a world that is rubo ra. There's so much evil in our world. There's such a great confusion of good and evil. People who are really evil think they're really good, and the people who are really good are thought of as being really evil. So the world's upside down. We all recognize that. Open the newspaper if you have any doubt. But I want to get to the resolution of this conflict. And part of the resolution is actually something that I taught not so long ago about Rosh Chodesh, when a Kodesh Baruch Hu brings a chatas. He tells us to bring a chatas, that bring a chatas on Rosh Chodesh, a sa'ir chatas l'Hashem, al zeh shemi'ateti et halevana. God asks us to bring a korban on his behalf to atone for the fact that he needed to diminish the moon. So the diminishment of the moon is really the same thing as mankind was also set down and much smaller, as well as the trees, which are woody, and the Livyatanim, the female was shechted, was destroyed, and the male was castrated. All the problems, the issues of our world, the status quo as we recognize it, a world which is dominated by bad stuff. God is apparently in absentia. He is behester panim. We live in hester panim. From time to time, we see great miracles, Baruch Hashem, and we're aware of God's presence. And yet the world is a rather dark place in many ways. So that's the outcome of this problem of God creating the world with a certain outlook and intent, and yet the world going astray. So it's the principle and agent gap as expressed in the world. And here's the rectification, okay? The rectification is a Mishnah in Avos. The Mishnah in Avos teaches us, Al tiyu ki avadim, hamshamshim et harav al manat lekabel pras. Ele havu ki avadim, hamshamshim et harav shelo al manat lekabel pras. Don't be like a servant who serves the master in order to receive reward. Rather, be like the servants who serve the master in order not to receive any reward, okay? Or not in order to receive any reward. The point being, and this I learned from my Rebbe, Rebbe Chana Shavita, don't serve God as a third party, as an as an external boss, telling you what to do, and then you desire to give less, to try to take more. No, understand that Chevel Nachalaso, that Chelek Elokami Mal, the Yipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim, God breathed into us a breath of life. We are carrying the divine spirit, a spark of life. God's candle is in our hand. He gave it to us. We are the Tselem Elokim. When the angels first saw Adam, Bikshu Loimer, the fun of Kadosh, the angels saw man and thought he was God, okay? So we are representatives of God in this world. It's our world. God gave it to us to sanctify his name, to spread his light, to receive and reflect the divine light. So we got to do our job, not because we're working for somebody else. We're the boss. So whether you're a soldier or a simple Jew, or you're a chassid, or you're a litvak, you're a Talmid Chacham, you're a oiseh mitzvahs, whatever your job is in Klal Yisrael, and even the Umos Ha'olam, the non-Jews, everybody's got a job. Everybody's got a task. Do your job and excel in it and be happy. Celebrate it, because God gave you this task to do. And he gave it to you like a loving father gives to his son. And not just the son earns a paycheck, the son owns the company. He's going to inherit the whole thing. So I made a picture here of Jews dancing in a circle because Asilavo, the tzaddikim, will make a mechol, and Kuchabricha will be in the middle, and they'll say, Zeh Elokeinu Zeh. This is God that we have been serving, and he is us, and we are part of him. And so we can celebrate our role and be like servants serving the master, not in order to receive a handout or a paycheck, but we own the company. So do your job. You're the boss. Thanks for being here. Have a gesunte Winter.